takes over. Thank you. I think, Swamiji, I'm so sorry. Can you open up with the prayer for us, please?
जी ॐ भूर्भुवस्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ विश्वानि देव सवितर्धुरितानि परासुवं यद्भद्रन्तन्न आसुवम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Thank you, Program Director, President of Arya Samaj South Africa, Pandit Kiran Sadgurji, and to all our divine embodiments of peace and love who have joined us on this extraordinary platform, Back to the Vedas. My Prem Namaste to each and every one of you, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present to you today. It's certainly a privilege to speak on a subject that's not just historical, but is also urgent and deeply rooted and forward looking. And that is how we present the Arya Samaj in the West today. So I'm going to share my screen with all of you because there is a presentation which I would like to go through. Panditji, just confirm if you can just see my screen.
Yes, Swamiji, it's very
Theek.
clear. Hmm.
Acha. So, friends, to answer this question and to answer it honestly, we must first understand where the Arya Samaj came from and why it moved beyond India and what it achieved among overseas Indians. And more so, what kind of calling now stands before us in this new age. Right? This becomes very, very important. When Maharishi Dayanand Saraswati ji founded the Arya Samaj, Hindu society was suffering from internal weaknesses and a lot of external pressure. Religious understanding, as many of you know, had become fragmented. Superstition had overshadowed knowledge, and at the same time, there was the onslaught of oppression, the conversions, the humiliation, and the growing threat of religious erosion. The Arya Samaj therefore emerged as more than just a reform society. It emerged as a moral awakening and it called people back to dignity, back to disciplined thought, and back to righteous conduct. But most importantly, it gave them the courage required to rebuild society. That same threat, my friends, was not confined to India alone. It was heard of and seen again in countries where Indians had settled or had been sent under the indentured labor system. Now, as I like to call it, in the Girmitia belt in South Africa, Mauritius, Fiji, Guyana, Suriname, Kenya, and other regions, Indians were sadly, cunningly uprooted from their familiar homes and structures, placed into difficult conditions, and often left vulnerable to religious neglect, being educationally backward, social humiliation, and obviously cultural disintegration. They didn't simply move geographically. They were often cut off from the structures that preserved their faith, their language, their culture, and their confidence. And as you all know, they were poor. Many were isolated. There was no religious instruction, it was weak. Community leadership was limited. But the pressures of conversion were real. And in many places, their identity itself was fragile. The Arya Samaj became one of the earliest organized Hindu movements to address this crisis. The Arya Samaj ultimately crossed seas because our people crossed seas, and where there was pain and the dignity of Indians needed to be restored, there was the Arya Samaj. And that history matters profoundly because it tells us something so essential. And we say this all the time. The Arya Samaj was never meant to be static. It was always meant to respond to the needs of the age and of the time. It carried Vedic culture abroad, not just as the philosophy, but as a disciplined community building force. And it gave Indians abroad a renewed sense of who they were and what they stood for. And one of the greatest instruments in this awakening was the Satyar Prakash. There's a picture of one of the indentured laborers reading the Satyar Prakash, the first picture. And this helped carry Dayananji's message to overseas Indians, challenging their ignorance, restoring their confidence, and strengthening their commitment to their identity and to Dharma. An unnamed Indian soldier who was actually stationed in Mauritius introduced the Satyar Prakash there in 1902. And in Fiji, the Satyar Prakash was first taken there by a Punjabi youth named Bihari Lal in 1904. Now, alongside the book came the Vedic missionaries. And among the pioneers was our dearest Bhai Parmanand. He traveled to East Africa, South Africa, England, Europe, British Guyana, and that's where he helped spread Vedic teachings and strengthen the overseas Hindu communities. And later was Swami Shankaranandji, who reached South Africa and became a major force in religious awakening and community organizations there. That's the bottom two pictures. Swami Shankaranandji on the right-hand side and Bhai Parmanand on the left. And then after that, many others followed them. Pandit Ishwar Vidyalanka, Swami Dhruvanand, Swami Satya Prakash, Mahatma Anand Swami, etc. Right? All of them came to these countries to strengthen the Indians. But what value did they and the Arya Samaj bring? They brought religious awakening. Right? They brought education. They brought language preservation. They brought social upliftment and organization. They brought back self-respect. But most importantly, they protected communities from cultural erosion and the conversion by strengthening them from within. Now, at this point, I want to touch on one extraordinary household stalwart, and that is none other than Swami Bhavani Dayal. And he was one of the most remarkable Arya Samaj leaders because he emerged from the South African Indian community itself, rather than just coming from India as the outside missionaries. He represented a new kind of leadership that was rooted in pain, in struggle, and aspirations of a diaspora community shaped by indenture, racial exclusion, and obviously the social insecurity. His life gave the Arya Samaj in South Africa a local voice, a distinctly local voice, linking the teachings with education, self-respect, language, and upliftment for a people struggling to define themselves with the dignity in a hostile society. And his impact, as you all know, reached far beyond religion. Swami Bhavani Dayal served in the leadership of the Natal Indian Congress. He took the South African Indian cause into the wider public and political forums, including India, where he campaigned against the discriminatory policies. His response to segregation and later the early apartheid era was shaped by the principles of the Arya Samaj. He saw spiritual reform and public resistance as inseparable. And in that sense, he stood for more than just Hindu revival alone. He embodied the claim that a community born from indenture was not temporary, was certainly not inferior or voiceless, but fully entitled to dignity, representation, and a future in South Africa. And we must honor this giant, for he shaped the foundations of Arya Samaj in fundamental ways and rose to address the challenges of his time using the teachings of the Samaj. And that was the success of the earliest Arya Samaj mission abroad, my friends. It identified a crisis. It understood the root causes and it responded with truth, education, organization, and with courage. The Arya Samaj, in its 123-year history outside of India, has stood the test of time and has done incredibly well through the sincere perseverance, determination, and commitment of our forebears. A remarkable amount of work has been done to ensure the preservation and promotion of Vedic culture and the Arya Samaj movement in foreign lands. Across generation, the Arya Samaj adapted in many ways to the local realities and the local dynamics, and this is important, often with limited resources. And in many cases, they were not dependent on headquarters in India. What they built was sustained through their sacrifice, through conviction, through their discipline and steady development. And that work has continued right up to the present day. That legacy, that strong legacy, must be acknowledged with gratitude and respect. Now, the reason I gave you this historical background is because it lays the foundation for where we are and what we need to achieve. So, at the same time, in looking how they had to adapt to the age, to the time, to the local circumstance, we have to be honest enough to acknowledge that we now face certain glaring realities that require a change and serious attention. In many places, we are seeing dwindling numbers, a lack of youth participation in the Samaj, a limitation to one demographic, and the urgent need to develop a more collective global presence. For much of the past history, the Arya Samaj outside India was focused on maintaining a more Indianized approach and keeping the Hindu, particularly Indian community, strong, connected, and educated in matters of dharma. And that was necessary in its time, and it served an important historical purpose. But you see, today we are living in a far more dynamic world. We live in societies made up of diverse communities and cultures. We live in a world shaped by digital technology and constantly changing identities, my friends. Increasingly, we see people interacting within that shared global culture that is not confined by race, by language, or ethnicity. The younger generation, especially, no longer sees the world in the same way we may have done or the older generations did. Skin color and language differences don't define their social world in the same way. There is now this middle culture and even a digital language to go with that culture. And people across all backgrounds are subscribing to this middle road. This means now that the Vedic value system and the Arya Samaj movement must be presented in a way that can encompass all groups. It must be inclusive and not exclusive. It must remain rooted in Vedic truth, but not appear culturally inaccessible or limited just to one linguistic or ethnic group. We must now carefully understand the global challenges and changes of the present age and ask, where do we stand today as opposed to how we understood our role and response over the past 123 years? So the question now, the major question before us, how does the Arya Samaj grow from a successful overseas Hindu reform movement into a truly global Vedic movement for the future? Now, to answer this properly, we have to first understand the West. We must identify what it is, its challenges, its lifestyle, its social realities, its strengths. Because when we understand the West, then only can we shape a response that is faithful to Vedic teachings, but yet effective in modern society. And then determine how those values are to be communicated, embodied, and applied in the Western context. India and the West differ in various glaring ways. In India, even where Hindu understanding may be diverse, and I know that India is becoming increasingly westernized in many cases, but still there is a strong overall cultural comfort zone, a cultural familiarity with dharma, family structure, identity, and obviously the vocabulary. But also the numbers are enough to ensure a good amount of generations of continuity for the Arya Samaj itself. But in the West, that foundation is far weaker and in many places now actually absent. We have to understand that religion in the West is often treated as either private, optional, or irrelevant because individualism is strong. Has become more dominant. And remember that young people are shaped heavily by this digital middle culture, secular education, and social influences that don't naturally enforce the spiritual discipline of Vedic living. Now, to understand this context more clearly, let's look at this on four levels: the social, moral, physical, and spiritual level. So let's start socially. The world is becoming more fragmented. Families are weaker. Loneliness and insecurity is rising. Many young people are emotionally isolated through heavy dependence on digital platforms, which encourage them to be things that they're not, encourage them to live lifestyles that are based on somebody else's success. Communities are increasingly shaped by divisions of class, race, politics, and ideology, while the trust in our institutions continue to decline. Education is often provides technical skill without the ethical grounding. And our economic systems reward competition without necessarily cultivating compassion or duty or social responsibility. But at the same time, modern societies are grappling with complex questions around LGBTQ identities. What is our response to it? Mental health, rapid technological change, and the moral direction of innovation, whether it is destructive or progressive. Mixed marriages and increasingly integrated communities are also reshaping identity. They're reshaping belonging and tradition in new ways. And this requires thoughtful, principled, and compassionate responses. Then let's look physically. Humanity is under strain from a broad spectrum of an unhealthy lifestyle: rising anxiety, substance abuse, poor diets, desk bound living, and a breakdown in balance. Climate destruction, water insecurity, pollution, and ecological degradation are no longer a concern for tomorrow, it is a concern for now. Morally, we see dishonesty is becoming normal, greed is being tolerated, that which is superficial is rewarded. We rationalize exploitation in the name of what? Progress and growth. And character is now secondary to your image. Worse too is that success is measured more by possession than by integrity. And then spiritually, there is a deep emptiness in modern life. Many people possess comfort, they possess convenience and access to endless information, yet still remain restless in their search for peace and meaning. This world is flooded, my friends, with loose, unfiltered information, but there's no wisdom. And in a society that, excuse me, calls itself free, many people still feel directionless and inwardly lost. At the same time, there is a glaring, visible, and dangerous rise in religious aggression, intolerance, and attempts at domination, which further deepens the social and spiritual tension. This makes genuine interfaith dialogue more necessary than ever. Not to erase our differences, but to cultivate the mutual respect, the tolerance, and peaceful coexistence amongst ourselves. Conversions also continue to rise in many contexts, including coercive, pressured, and marriage related conversions, which raises important concerns about the freedom of conscience, identity, and dignity. Within the Hindu fold itself, there's a great diversity of ideology, belief, and tradition. And that diversity is the reality of modern Hindu life, especially in Hindu households shaped by intermarriage, migration, and personal preferences. The challenge then is to move beyond rigidity, my friends, and narrow vision without compromising one's own identity or convictions. There must be a common ground in which our people feel welcomed rather than condemned, and engaged rather than feeling ridiculed. These internal tensions are real, and I see them on a regular basis, especially where their distinctions remain strong between the Sanatani or Puranic and Vedic outlooks. The question is not how to erase the difference, but how to break rigid barriers and coexist with mutual respect, while recognizing that in today's world, every person has a right to conscience, to belief, to their own form of religion to which they agree to want to experience. A mature spiritual response must therefore combine conviction with humility and a culture of respectful coexistence. Now, when we present the Arya Samaj values in the West, we cannot assume that people will automatically understand our language, framework, or the urgency of the need for such a value system when their own may already exist. We have to respond to the world as it is. At the same time, the West is not defined only by crisis. We speak about the West, the West, the West, as if it's negative. It also has strengths, and these can become advantages in the spread of Vedic values and the Arya Samaj movement. The West values organization, transparency, professionalism, volunteerism, education, research, innovation, and freedom of thought. Now, these might be construed differently in places, but if the concept is there, we can use it to our advantage. Many Western societies provide legal protections, open civic spaces, digital infrastructure, and strong institutional frameworks, which are not obstacles but are opportunities. A culture that values education helps the Arya Samaj present the Vedic thought clearly. Freedom of religion allows us to speak openly. Strong systems and accountability support good governance. The spirit of volunteerism strengthens our seva. Technology can extend Vedic teachings far beyond the mandir, and a questioning culture in the West suits the Arya Samaj well because it has always stood for reason, for inquiry, and for truth. Therefore, the West must not just be viewed as a challenge to the Arya Samaj, it must also be viewed as an opportunity. But to use that opportunity wisely, our response has to be structured. It cannot be vague and it cannot be reactive. And this is where I want to introduce you to the Arya Samaj Global Development Framework, which has become so significant. In New York in 2024 at the Arya Mahasammelan, there was a discussion that took place between all the leaders of the various countries to start talking about greater collaboration, the current status of the Arya Samaj, and how we need to grow for the future, bring on the youth, and alter our direction if necessary. They were robust discussions, robust conversations, but eventually everyone agreed that a strong collective approach is needed, collective effort is needed, and one that is distinct from India because of the international dynamics. That too, more so, the locally international dynamics. And thus, last year in, I can't remember the state now in the US, it was accepted, everybody was happy, and it was ratified. Pandit Kiran was as representing as president of Arya Samaj South Africa. We went to the Sammelan last year, the 150-year celebration in India at the Arya Mahasammelan, and there the Arya Samaj Global Forum was formally accepted, appointed, and the framework adopted so that this global committee can go forward and take the Arya Samaj and lead the Arya Samaj on the international platform. Now, this is not merely, this platform or the framework is not to repeat the ideals, but it turns it into a strategic plan. This sets out a vision of the Arya Samaj as a vibrant, strong, and globally progressive dharmic movement, rooted in Vedic wisdom and relevant to every generation, becoming a moral force for equality, freedom, peace, unity, and environmental harmony. The vision that we gave to it is a united progressive Arya Samaj inspiring a just, peaceful, and sustainable world. The mission is to apply the eternal values of Sanatana Vedic Dharma, which is truth, equality, justice, and selfless service, as a living blueprint to build strong communities, inspire ethical leadership, and drive sustainable transformation across nations. Now, it must be guided by the 7 pillars of the Arya Samaj Global Development Framework and rooted in the 10 principles of the Arya Samaj. Now, in front of you, you will see the 7 pillars, and I'll go through them step by step. These pillars were formalized here in this country proudly and adopted globally last year. And this committee oversees this, and there are various teams under that committee that will serve to ensure each of these are achieved over a long-term vision with different key performance indicators and milestones, etc. Right? And we linked all of them to the 10 principles of the Arya Samaj. So this is a more pictorial view of each of them, but as I said, we will go through them step by step. Education and training, governance and standards, service and justice, digital presence and reputation, youth and community, environment and sustainability, and then we changed Sunday because not everybody has a satsang on Sunday, but satsang reform. So let's start with the first pillar. Pillar 1 is education and training. In the West, my friends, ignorance is not always a lack of schooling, but it is a lack of moral, spiritual, and civilizational grounding. Many people are highly educated professionally, but have little understanding of Dharma, Vedic philosophy, or any form of disciplined living. So this pillar calls us to create a strong curriculum, train our teachers, purohits, our leaders, so that there's also a standardization of our education and training, and develop leaders and make Vedic learning accessible to all, to children, to adults, to seekers, using modern educational methods. The framework specifically calls for an international training center, a global curricula, leadership academies, and a digital Vedic academy, which is all proudly in process at the moment. Right? We even have our own AI bot, which I'll tell you about a little later. Now, language plays a central role here because in the West, English functions as a broad global medium. It allows larger and more diverse communities to relate to the Vedic value system and to the Arya Samaj as a movement. If we want to reach younger generations, mixed background families, non-Hindi speaking Hindus, and a wider public, which is what the Samaj's mandate is, to reach the world, irrespective of the background they come from, then English must be a major vehicle of explanation and teaching. At the same time, language must also be considered geographically, and local language must be included where needed. So at present, the status quo in many places is that Hindi and Hindi-speaking Hindus form the majority, and satsangs often remain limited to that audience alone. Hindi remains important. Nobody's disrespecting the power of Hindi. Swamiji ultimately spoke Sanskrit. Then when he started his mission, he was recommended, Swamiji, speak Hindi, you will reach the masses. And he wanted them to be proud of their identity, use Matrabhasha instead of conforming to a foreign language. It doesn't mean the whole world needs to adapt Hindi. We need to fight for indigenous languages, local languages, for the communities that speak with them. Because the mandate of the Arya Samaj is value-based, not to change culture. So, whilst Hindi remains important and must be respected, language inclusion and adaptation would invite and must invite diverse communities into the Arya Samaj fold. This pillar is a direct expression of principle 3, that the Vedas are the books of true knowledge and it is our duty to read them, teach them, hear them, and recite them. But it also fulfills principle 8, which calls on us to dispel ignorance and promote knowledge. On a global scale, it means democratizing access to Vedic wisdom across countries, across generations, and across languages. The second pillar is governance and standards. The West value systems, my friend. It values accountability and law, even though we see everybody violating it. But by principle, it's valued, right? These are not burdens on the Arya Samaj. They are opportunities to embody truth institutionally. This framework calls for us as a movement to create and establish a global constitution, ethical leadership, certification, auditing standards, and annual development reporting. Creating a structure from the top to the bottom that develops different tiers of leadership, that is inclusive on the gender scale, and that finally gives us the accountability necessary to run as a truly global movement, not just in the quarters where each one is a ruler unto himself. This fulfills principle 4: accept truth, renounce untruth, because good governance demands transparency, honesty, and correction. It fulfills principle 5, that action must be guided by dharma after deliberating right and wrong, and we forget it. All the time we see leadership forget that. It fulfills principle 10, because a global movement requires common discipline and shared standards while still allowing the freedom of local implementation. The third pillar is service and justice. Now, this is where the Arya Samaj has to move beyond concern, inward concern, and become visibly useful to humanity on a global scale. The framework calls for coordinated humanitarian action. We have done splendidly well in South Africa. Our social services and social justice is really unparamount to what you see elsewhere. But can you imagine if we work together on a global scale, with each other's strengths coming together, the force we can be? This calls for coordinated humanitarian action, volunteer networks, a global relief fund, and public advocacy grounded in equality, dignity, and justice. Now, in the West, this means local service, family support, youth mentoring, educational upliftment, care for the vulnerable, women's dignity, mental health awareness, environmental justice, and meaningful interfaith dialogue and engagement to cultivate mutual respect and tolerance. But it must also go further. Service and justice must include serious advocacy and policy engagement. Arya Samaj should contribute solutions linked to the 2030 development goals in areas such as poverty, education, health, clean water, reduced inequality, sustainable communities, climate responsibility, and peace efforts. These concerns intersect naturally with the Arya Samaj's long commitment to truth, equality, and selfless service. And if global policies are being shaped on crucial human issues, the Arya Samaj should not stand outside the room. Over time, it has to cultivate representatives, scholars, and advocates who can speak to a wider audience. International deliberations, including forums connected with the United Nations, offering the Vedic voice on all these issues. Again, this pillar powerfully fulfills the primary objective of the Arya Samaj, Principle 6, which is to do good to the world and promote the physical, spiritual, and social good of everyone. It reflects Principle 7, our conduct guided by love and righteousness and justice, and Principle 9, to see our welfare in the welfare of all. The fourth pillar is digital presence. Fundamental. The modern West is shaped heavily online. Identity, learning, debate, influence are all increasing digitally. So this framework calls for a central digital portal, multilingual content, training, and a network of digital sevaks. Fulfills Principle 1, Principle 8, and Principle 4. The source of all knowledge, dispelling ignorance, and confronting falsehood with clarity. The digital sphere must become a field of prachar, serious lectures, youth-centered content, English language teaching, local language adaptation, and intelligent engagement with modern questions. You're sitting in one of these programs that, if now placed on a more wide digital platform, is doing what it should be doing. And that is why you should be proud that you are on this back to the Vedas lecture series. The fifth pillar is youth and community. Again, youth face identity confusion, anxiety on career, moral relativism, social media pressure, loneliness, detachment from our traditions, or the Vedic value system, or any value system for that matter. This framework calls for a global youth forum, mentorship networks, youth-led initiatives, innovation funding, and youth representation in governance. Again, this pillar fulfills Principle 7, building communities grounded in love, Principle 8, and Principle 9. Why? To teach young people that life is not about individual success, but about service and collective upliftment. One of the strengths of the West is that it often encourages initiative, creativity, and leadership. And Arya Samaj should use that positively by inviting the youth not only to attend, but to lead, to build, to question, and to serve. The sixth pillar is environment and sustainability. South Africa, no need to even say it because we're part and signatory to the Climate Justice Charter. The framework includes climate action, water conservation, biodiversity, animal welfare, ecological education, and policy engagement. This pillar fulfills Principle 5 because it requires moral deliberation about how humans should live. It fills Principle 6 and Principle 9 again, because the West's scientific culture and environmental awareness can be used as an advantage. And the Arya Samaj can show that Vedic wisdom is not backward or archaic, but it is deeply relevant to planetary responsibility. Finally, the seventh pillar, satsang reform. This framework seeks to revitalize weekly satsang through hybrid formats, a relevant, standardized curriculum. So wherever you go in the world, you will fit in. Yeah, you will have your differences here and there that is adapted to the local needs, but by and large, a standard sort of approach in which everybody can fit in. Relevant curriculum, youth and women's participation, digital access, and contemporary themes, while preserving yajna, swadhyay, and satsang as the core. Now, this is especially important in the Western setting, because if satsang remains too narrow linguistically or culturally, it will lose younger and more diverse audiences, and we see it today. So the task is clear: preserve the Vedic core, but broaden the communication form. Do not limit it to one language alone. Use English as a major bridge. Use local languages. Make satsang spiritually serious, but also accessible, relevant, and welcoming. So the picture comes clear now, I hope. The 7 pillars become the strategic structure. The 10 principles form the moral and spiritual foundation, and the Western response is our contextual application. And if the 10 principles are the soul of the Arya Samaj, then these 7 pillars are the modern global instruments through which that soul must act with the world. If the 10 principles are what they say they are, let us put them into global action. Our task in the West is not to dilute the Arya Samaj for modern society. Don't look at it as dilution. It is to apply its eternal principles intelligently through forms that speak to modern society. And this means education that is deep and accessible, governance that is ethical and credible, service that includes charity and advocacy, digital presence that spreads truth at large scales, youth development that builds leaders, environmental action that embodies dharma, and satsang reform that opens the doors of the Vedic wisdom to all communities. And all of this must be done with one important balance: global vision, local wisdom. One Vedic core, one Arya mission, but many local applications. This is how Arya Samaj becomes not merely present in the West, but influential in the West. And this is ultimately what Swamiji's vision was. This is what the Arya Samaj's vision is, Krinvanta Vishwamare. And this is how it becomes over the next 50 years. Because this is a 50-year plan, not simply a network of institutions, but a global movement working to make the world noble. And this is exactly the scale on how we now need to think, not only for local survival as we've been doing all this time, not only our scattered activities here and there, and not only keeping the nostalgia of preserving what we have, but we have to think collectively and globally. When we speak of a 50-year plan, we're talking about civilizational continuity. We are asking, how do we ensure that the Arya Samaj is still strong, relevant, and transformative for our grandchildren and great grandchildren, not just ours as an Arya Samaj family, but as a global family, to preserve an eternal value system uplifting humanity? How do we ensure that it produces and not only memorialize leaders? How do we ensure that it is not only respected internally but recognized externally as a force for good? This 50-year vision must include major shifts from localism to global coordination, from our informal continuation to intentional global leadership development, from weak visibility to strong public presence, and from, how could I say, inherited participation because we grew up in it, to actually trained and progressive participation. This, my friends, is the generation in which this change can take place, where Krinvanto Vishwam Aryam becomes a true reality. The next 50 years has to produce trained leaders on every continent, credible institutions with shared standards and strong youth networks, global education platforms, and visible humanitarian service. Brothers and sisters, this is the map of the Arya Samaj as it stands. History has brought us to an important threshold. The early Arya Samaj went out. They uplifted the Girmitya, the displaced, the neglected, the vulnerable Indians abroad. It restored faith, language, education, dignity, and organization. And it's in front of you. That's the success. But today, the Arya Samaj must once again rise to the needs of the age. This time, the mission is wider. We must address the fractured family, the confused youth, the spiritually tired adult, the morally uncertain society, the environmentally threatened planet, and the community searching for truth, meaning, and relevance. May we build an Arya Samaj that is rooted in the Vedas, relevant in every generation, strong in every country, ethical in every institution, alive in every satsang, and useful to the whole world. This is the task, this is the opportunity, and this is the vision. Krinvanto Vishwam Aryam. Let us together make the whole world noble. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
Swamiji, thank you for that most inspiring presentation. Um, just listening to the fervor, listening to your strength in terms of the direction that you would like us to go, and being a young Swami, you have given us so much of food for thought in terms of direction and where we want Arya Samaj to go for the next 50 years. Just to recap quickly, and I know we have time against us, time constraints, but I would just like to say to you that you raise something that is very important, and one of them is the Satyartha Prakash. The Satyartha Prakash, as you know, is the magnum opus of Swami Dayanand Saraswati, and I would suggest to you, just think about it, and coming out of this beautiful lecture, is that maybe we need to start a series on the Satyartha Prakash. Think about what I'm saying.
Panditji, on that point, can I mention something?
Yes, sir.
I'm so glad you brought it up because there was a discussion in these deliberations, and the Satya Prakash came out as part of these discussions because One thing we admire so vividly about Swamiji is his recognition for reform and change, the need to always adapt to time, place, and circumstance, and to remove what is no longer necessary or relevant. And the discussion is actually how do we create a commentary on the Satyar Prakash that is relevant to today rather than issues which may no longer be relevant. So, part of this process is to develop a new commentary, taking the principles of the Satya Prakash and Swamiji's guidance and interpreting it for the modern day.
No, thank you for that. Let's look into that. Let's make that a project. I would just like to just also mention, and I would like to thank, and I sincerely acknowledge that you touched very deeply on Swami Bhavani Dayal. He is another revolutionary leader of the Arya Samaj from South Africa that we should be looking at and doing further research. I know it has been done, but he is a true leader of the Arya Samaj. The, the, the seven pillars that you touched on gives us a huge foundation for us to take us forward. And your beautiful synergy with the 10 principles of the Arya Samaj, because we always quoting the 10 principles of the Arya Samaj, but bringing it in tune with the seven pillars also gives us an opportunity of how we relate to education and training, governance standards, service and justice, youth and community, satsang, and especially satsang reform. One of the things that's hitting our community at the moment, Swamiji, I don't know what's your take on the satsangs that are quite vibrant at the moment, and we're having these bhajan festivals and clubbing. What's your take on that?
Pandiji, I'm going to be truthful and open and say that I fully support it. With obviously the correct controls so that it doesn't lose its essence. But I tell you, a week ago, was it 2 weeks ago, I witnessed for the first time a bhajan club. I heard about it. I haven't been to one, but I happened to be at the Hare Krishna festival and I witnessed this one by Shiv Shafla, which stuck with only the bhajans in a completely different way altogether. And they were about 4 to 5,000 youth that connected. Panditji, if we harness on this energy, mold it in a direction that has an after effect in which we could build on it, it is something that we could use to our advantage. Clearly, there is a chord which we struck, a chord which was struck, not us actually, but wherever it was struck for the first time, which has potential. This conversation is necessary because there are a lot of those that disagree and that have different opinions. Let's get around the table, discuss it, because it's an important discussion for how we are to embark on such things in the future, things which may not be traditional or orthodox, but require revitalization.
Thank you, Swamiji. I'm going to the chat messages that have come through. We have a message that has come through from Pandit Shamin Mahabir. She says, Dr. Shamin Mahabir, an inspiring and pragmatic lecture that you have just delivered. We have Harshila from Pietermaritzburg, who's mentioned that your presentation is brilliant. Hemkalaji from the Cape, she says that it is so very inspiring. Thank you for that, Hemkalaji. And we have Pandit Krishnachan Ramsaran, absolutely inspiring message, Swamiji. We like your vision. Thank you for that, Panditji. Bhavana Nathu, thank you, Swamiji, and expressing her gratitude to you. Pratima's iPhone, Namaste, Swamiji. You are truly an inspiration to all. Thank you for your concise and informative presentation. I agree that religion should be dynamic. And I think I agree with you also that we have a dynamic young spiritual scholar amidst us, and he is living up to his teachings and what he practices. I also have a hand that's up, and that's Karuna. Karuna, do you have
Thank you, Kiran Bhai. Thank you, Swamiji. You really came up to exactly all the points that I think have been frustrating all of us, particularly you. Swamiji, if we could just raise the next steps I think you and Kiran Bhai need to take to the global platform our Ved Niketan program. We basically have material in English. We have graded examinations. They are all online. So I think that's the very next step for us as South Africa to begin to give the kickstart to, the entire 7 pillars, but particularly to the youth, the digital processes and other things that you've raised. Secondly, I think we need to share with everybody that the Arya Samaj website has more traffic from people all over the world than South Africans. So one of the things about our website is that all the material that Pandit Nardev ji wrote over the years has been digitized and put onto our website. There's a part that is open reading room, free literature, free things, and then there's a subscriber part also, so that we build sustainability. The other 2 points I think we need to raise very openly is that for ourselves in the Arya Samaj South Africa, we have adopted 2 programs for the next 50 years. One is gender-based violence, and that is to work with other faith groups and really end gender-based violence in South Africa. And the second is the climate justice. But I think if we have to look internally, we are way advanced of the world. We have more women priests. We have women in leadership. And sadly, the Arya Samaj is still very patriarchal. Intelligent women are not liked in the Arya Samaj. Our men need to be developed a little bit more to be more open and accept equality. And accept not just younger people, but also women who have the ability to put things across, to do the work, and to give them the respect that they deserve. And I think, if we look at the Manu Smriti, and if we say Manu was the first lawgiver, Manu said, where women are respected, they live divine people. So I think that's something we need to really look at within South Africa and outside. Secondly, the issue of governance. That is seriously lacking, and that's where we need to get every single affiliate of the Arya Samaj in South Africa to actually understand governance and then to share it with our country, because we have a lot of corruption and governance mishaps in our country. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Karuna, for those for that input. Okay, Swamiji, your hand is up. Yeah.
Thank you, Panditji. Karunaji, just 2 things to just follow up with you. So I'm going to actually just send this thing on the chat quickly. All of you will just look at your chat. There is a message which I put with saying aryasamaj.ai. Go to your internet browser and you type Arya Samaj AI. That is our vetted, proper, undiluted Vedic ChatGPT, and it's currently in its beta phase. We're developing it as part of giving you the correct and authenticated information regarding Vedas and everything that has a Vedic response. It's still in a beta phase, and it's based and it draws its answers from information and text that we provide with it. So obviously, currently all the vetted Vedas and subsequent Arya Samaj and Vedic books done by our missionaries and our scholars, etc., uploaded. Karunaji, with your permission, I did discuss it with our developers. Obviously, we need permission from the publishers, in this case, Ved Niketan, but it would be a gem to have the Ved Niketan literature uploaded as source material to this global aryasamaj.ai platform. So when the Ved Niketan team does sit and discuss, if you could raise it, it would be good to have the literature that we've published and Panditji has published onto this global platform. And then the second thing was, okay, sorry, I lost it now. I'll come back to it as soon as I found it.
I'm sure
But
it's the
yeah, I hope
women's thing, but you'll think about it.
yes, no, that's important because you would have seen, and many of you would have seen that internationally there is still a struggle. Arya Samaj South Africa can be proud that it is actually dominated more by female representation than it is by male, because you don't get that everywhere else in a hurry. I can tell you that. So that is going to be addressed. It's a very strong point, and it comes from many progressive leaders around the world as well. So definitely that is a major point that is going to be addressed very soon. Thank you.
I take cognizance of what Karunaji has raised, especially with the women, but with the women's issues. But I think the first female president of Arya Samaj was Professor Usha Ben Desai, and we have what you call women that play a key role in the society. But this is not the platform to debate that, as much as she's brought it up. We do have internal issues. We're being honest about it. But I think we are very proud, and I second you when you say that the priests that we have in South Africa, we surpass those internationally, and most of them are from the women, and they are playing a very key role in society. Swamiji, we're coming to the close of the program. We've gone well over the 1 hour mark. I would like to, on behalf of Arya Samaj South Africa, thank you for your wonderful presentation that you have done this afternoon, evening. You have taken us through the global sphere with the 10 with the 7 pillars. You've given us a better understanding of what is the future of the Arya Samaj movement in the international arena, and also what we can take to the local arena. I would just like to mention, and I know just as I'm talking, I'm just thinking about the Vedniketan international platform and examinations. I know for a fact, because of this global village that we are looking at and the committee that we are looking at, you know for a fact that Trinidad Tobago wants to actually do all our examinations. So that itself tells you that by just having this global committee, it's opening up all the work that we are doing in South Africa, and we are taking it to other places in the world. Swamiji, I'd like to just thank you for being there for us, being a guiding light for us, and being a shining star for us. I would like to, on behalf of Arya Samaj South Africa, all our officials and our members, our priests and our congregations, our affiliates, and all our members throughout the country, I would like to thank you for this most wonderful presentation that you've given us today. And
Paramatma's blessings to all of you. Thank you so much, Panditji, and to all of you who have attended.
Yes, I would like you to close off with the closing prayer, and thereafter we will switch off. Thank you so much.
Om Dyo ShantirantarikshamShanti Prithvi Shantirapah Shantiroshadhaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shantirvishwe Devah Shantirbrahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shantirev Shanti Sama Shantiredhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Dhanyavad. Namaste. Namaste.
Namaste. Namaste.
Kiran, if we could just make the announcement for the next session, which will be on the 20th of May, and it would be a report back on the gender-based violence pilot project that was implemented in Pietermaritzburg.
Thank you for that, Karuna. Thank you. We will definitely be speaking about that. And I think at some stage we are planning something on the agroecology project also.